And welcome back to your Newsmax Daily for a Monday, May 6th, 2024, or 5/6/24, the 127th day of the year. It's the first Monday of 4 Mondays this month, and National Nurses Day. Big day, established in 1965 by the International Council of Nurses, and then officially recognized by President Reagan in 1982 as a day to recognize and thank nurses everywhere for all that you do, and to commemorate Florence Nightingale, a pioneer of nursing, of course. So if you are a nurse, kudos to you, big thank yous to you, and today is your day. And what a weekend it was, right? Hope you enjoyed yours. The defending Stanley Cup champion, Las Vegas Golden Knights, who should be sued, by the way, by the University of Central Florida for stealing their mascot, were sent packing last night by the Dallas Stars in the NHL playoffs, which have not disappointed at all. Saturday, Boston got by Toronto. They begin round 2 tonight in South Florida against the Panthers. Some great NBA playoffs as well. My local team, the Orlando Magic, bounced. We had a photo finish at the Kentucky Derby and a photo finish at the NASCAR race in Kansas on Sunday, which went to Kyle Larson. And since he really doesn't have much of anything else to do, I mean, there's not a whole lot going on in his life, right? Former President Donald Trump made a visit to the Miami Grand Prix on Sunday. Now, keep in mind, this is Formula One racing in Miami. That is a very diverse crowd chanting USA, USA upon the arrival of Donald Trump. Oh, and back on Friday, Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar and his wife were named in an indictment claiming they accepted nearly $600,000 in bribes from a foreign gas company and the Bank of Mexico. Well. So hopefully we'll be learning more about that today. A growing list of indictments in Congress. But the big news from the weekend was the RNC retreat at a Palm Beach hotel hosted by RNC co-chair Laura Trump, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik. That was followed by a big event at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort and home that included many Republicans said to be potential running mates for Trump. Senators J.D. Vance, Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, Congressman Byron Donalds, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem was there and apparently left early for some reason, and former North Dakota Governor and GOP presidential candidate Doug Burgum, who is said to be on the list of potential running mates as well. So Trump was in court back on Thursday and Friday, right? Let's go back to last week. That was after hosting 2 campaign events last Wednesday, right? So on the campaign trail Wednesday, in court Thursday and Friday, then hosted the big event at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday, then went to Miami Grand Prix on Sunday, walked around, talked to people. I mean, he doesn't just sit in the crowd, right? And he is back in New York today as his trial resumes. President Biden, meantime, spent his weekend at his Delaware home, I presume resting. He was still there this morning when he received this morning's briefing before heading back to the White House to present the Commander-in-Chief's trophy to the U.S. Military Academy Army Black Knights. So congratulations to them. They will have not the U.S. Army Black Knights, but the President and First Lady and the White House will have a Cinco de Mayo celebration later today, even though it was yesterday. Trump attorney Christina Bobb spoke about the first 2 weeks of the Trump trial with our Bob Brooks.
So, Christina, I know former President Trump says a lot that this is election interference. He can't go campaign. I think there's another level to this, though. He just talked about a lot of issues under Joe Biden that aren't good. The border, inflation, his economy, wars going on in the world. I think it's election interference in that the trial is taking up the news cycle just as well. Do you believe that was part of their plan?
Yes, it's their only plan. They can't beat him on the issues. They can't beat him on the polls. They can't beat him in popularity. They can't beat him in social media. They can't beat him in real life. So they have to create this alternate reality where he's some mob boss, basically, which in and of itself is ridiculous and somewhat comical if it weren't so tragic, because it's actually helping him. It's actually making him more relatable to the American people. And he's actually reaching demographics that Republicans haven't reached in generations. So everything they are doing is backfiring. It's not working. It's helping him. He's growing in the polls, and the left is failing miserably.
Well, they could never talk about anything Joe Biden has run on. Or that he's done well. They can't run away. What are they going to talk about? They can't. Now, former President Trump, he's got track record. I'll tell you what, inflation under him was well under control. There was world peace. Gas was under $2, below $1.60, I think, in some places here. But I don't want to downplay the seriousness of this case. It is no laughing matter that they have taken our former president in. They've got him on criminal trial right now. This is historic, and I think it sets a horrible precedent. But I want to bring up this poll here. Americans might not seem so as obsessed as what Democrats had thought or had hoped. You can see not only is he leading in several key swing states, but also about 55% of the country, they're not paying attention to this trial whatsoever. I don't think it's having the impact that Democrats had hoped. If you hate Trump, there's plenty of people out there who do. You like that they're going after him. If you're a supporter, like so many of us are, that you think he's not going to get a fair shake from the judge. He's not going to get a fair shake from the jury. And that's going to be that. And we're going to move on at some point.
That's exactly right. Not only is this trial not having the intended effect, which was to defame Donald Trump and his supporters and try to dissuade people from liking him and wanting to vote for him, not only is it not doing that, it's having the opposite effect. And people are starting to follow him and like him more and recognize that this is a political witch hunt. And to your point, they don't care about the outcome. This trial is nothing but political theater, and no one likes the show.
Trump attorney Christina Bobb on Newsmax. Let's move on to some actual policy that you're not hearing much about because of Trump's trial and other things. This is Newsmax host Lydia Serrani on Sunday Agenda.
Putting the safety of American citizens second. Reportedly, the Biden administration wants to bring in Gaza refugees right here to the United States in your community. Think about that. Meantime, surrounding Mideast countries, they're spending billions of dollars to keep those refugees out. Why? Because there's really no way to discern who is an innocent civilian and who could be coming to do harm. Some Republicans are now fighting back. For more, I'm joined by the former acting secretary for the Department of Homeland Security and Newsmax contributor Chad Wolf. Also with us is retired Brigadier General for the Air Force and Newsmax contributor General Holt. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Chad, let's start off with what's going on. Again, another Biden policy endangering the welfare of Americans. And thankfully, we have some lawmakers that are trying to stop him. A letter signed by 35 GOP senators was sent to Joe Biden's office. It said that any refugees from Gaza pose a, quote, national security risk to the United States. What do you think?
Well, I just don't see how this makes much sense. If there are places like Egypt and Jordan who are not taking these individuals, primarily because I would assume of security concerns, why do they need to come here to the United States? So there is a refugee process that is in place. But I think we have to keep this in mind, that this is on top of the millions of individuals that have come across that southern border and are now in the United States that are resettling in communities across this country, in addition to the hundreds of thousands of Afghans that the Biden administration has brought here. So this idea that the United States is the only country in the world that can take refugees and find places for individuals across the globe is nonsense. If these individuals from Gaza need to leave that territory and be resettled, they need to do that as close to Gaza as possible. And so that's somewhere in the Mideast or that's somewhere in Europe.
That's former acting secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. More from Lydia and retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt.
It's the risk of terrorists entering our country. It's not a hypothetical that we know of. 169 people on the FBI terror watch list were arrested just last year at the southern border. That's more than the last 6 years combined. I think under President Trump, it was 11 total, right? And we're talking about 169 in just last year alone. Is this an underestimation? I mean, how at risk are we for a potential terror attack? I keep saying this, 9/11, I was around for it, 19 people. It cost about $500,000 to do this incredible damage. The world has never been the same, and yet we're allowing millions of people, and he wants to bring in Gaza refugees as well. We don't even know if they could be Hamas terrorists.
Yeah, foreign wars are now coming here to our soil because of these policies. And it's not that they don't make sense, it's that it's quite nefarious against the United States. So the administration is absolutely in full view of all of us acting against the security interests of the United States. This is our number one security threat. There is nothing even close. And to your point, we're going to have terrorist attacks in this country. The stuff we're seeing on the university campuses is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a nice camouflage for what we know is coming. But Mayorkas, who can't be impeached because you can't even have the Democrats show up for due process, he's been down to these UN camps in the Darien Gap, these massive refugee camps, where one camp all by itself is for Chinese fighting age men alone that are coming in by the thousands. And so what is the purpose? Well, the purpose is that we're going to have our hands full, and aiding and abetting is happening out of Washington, D.C. With regards to Gaza, this is just appeasement for Iran. This is appeasement for the region. If Jordan and Egypt won't grab a shovel and take their people, then why should we be doing that at a time when we have no idea who's in our country or what their designs on us are?
Again, that is retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt on Sunday Agenda with Lydia Serrani. Pretty scary stuff, right? But yet, all you are hearing on the big networks today is about how Donald Trump spoke so badly about Judge Merchan and cursed out Special Prosecutor Jack Smith during a private event at his home. And about the trial, of course, and what he said outside the trial and how he just keeps running his mouth. But it's crickets on any of Biden's policies and the border. They'll cover the ceremony at the White House today, I'm sure, but that is about it. And how about Title IX, rules to protect trans athletes in girls' sports? More from host Emma Reckenberg.
Joining us now to weigh in, celebrity fitness trainer Jillian Michaels. Jillian, welcome, and thanks for coming on today. So President Biden and his administration plans to really change the entire landscape of women's sports by essentially allowing gender identity to cover anyone who calls themselves a woman the chance to play in women's sports. As an athlete yourself, does that sound fair?
It sounds absurd. Listen, I want to be totally clear. I'm empathetic to the situation. I completely understand why we want to provide inclusion, but we also need to provide a level playing field, and you have to determine what's the overriding principle here, right? And the science just does not lend itself to this case. If you look at every single aspect, from a genetic predisposition to strength, there are over 6,500 genes in biological men and biological women that express themselves differently. 3,000 of those differences impact the musculoskeletal system. It's just, I could go on and on and on. The data's not there, and it's simply not fair. You're not transphobic. You're not a bigot if you're pointing out the unbelievable differences and the insane advantage that biological males have, even on puberty blockers.
Sure. You don't have to be an expert to see these clear differences. And I think, too, you know what goes into actually preparing for a match or a game. You've got to go through the locker room. There's a lot of training involved right now. There are other instances where women perhaps might not feel comfortable when you're in a very vulnerable state and you're sharing it with a biological male.
You know, listen, my feeling on this one is that it's not even a necessary fight. I've yet to hear about a transgender woman attacking biological women. I would say, I completely understand. I get it. But this is not one where it's like painting trans people as predators. I don't think it's a fight you win. I don't think it's a necessary fight. I don't think it makes sense. I get that. And I understand biological women are feeling uncomfortable. But I just think from a competitive perspective, on the scientific basis alone, the conversation ends there. And when you go down that rabbit hole, you definitely run the risk of being called transphobic or bigoted. And it's just not worth the argument when you don't even need to make it. The data is overwhelming on the advantages that biological men and transgender women on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones still have over biological women. It is overwhelming. I could get into unbelievable statistics that you don't even need to make that case.
Right.
Yeah, why are we even having the conversation, right? That's fitness expert Jillian Michaels on Newsmax. Remember how the Biden administration was all about the science. Why aren't they looking at the science now? Because the science doesn't fit the narrative. And yet, in the new ABC News Ipsos poll, it shows former President Trump and President Biden basically locked in a virtual tie for the presidency, with Trump edging out Biden by 2 percentage points, which is basically the margin of error for the poll. So again, essentially tie. I don't really care about the polling. I've said that numerous times. We have learned not to put that much stock into polling or trust the polling, but you have to follow the polling. You know, on Mondays, I always try and work in some commentary from Tom Basile, host of America Right Now. That's Saturday mornings on Newsmax. In this segment, Tom is explaining how President Biden, who claims to be a Catholic, cannot be a Catholic only on Sunday.
Mr. Biden and Catholic Democrat leaders are wrong to suggest that you can be in communion with the Catholic Church personally while advocating for policies such as abortion, euthanasia, the existence of more than 2 genders, and other radical policies that are against biblical teaching. Mr. Biden's administration has also been exposed for attacking the church itself as an institution, targeting Catholics with law enforcement, treating them as extremists, and he's also continued the Obama-era attacks on religious freedom of Catholic institutions. It is increasingly clear that many Catholic Democrats practice a politically convenient Catholic nominalism that is more for the cameras than really being a soldier for Christ. For Mr. Biden's own good, and for the good of the faithful, his home bishop, in this case Cardinal Wilton Gregory of Washington, D.C., or Bishop William Koenig, who covers his home diocese in Delaware, should announce publicly that Mr. Biden has incurred excommunication by his actions. However, Cardinal Gregory is a political liberal who has only offered tepid criticism of Mr. Biden. Bishop Koenig indicated in 2021 that he would rather educate Mr. Biden on Catholic teaching about abortion, as if that were necessary, rather than deny him communion. Canon law was expanded to empower bishops to publicly excommunicate officials in 1983. And Catholics should be concerned that church leaders have refused to act here. The Vatican is also complicit here in trying not to offend Mr. Biden, Democrats, or Catholics generally. In 2021, Cardinal Luis Ladaria of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in Rome told the U.S. bishops that, quote, it would be misleading if such a statement were to give the impression that abortion and euthanasia alone constitute the only grave matters that demand the fullest level of accountability. Really? What could be graver than leading the largest government apparatus in history with a global platform for articulating public policy and using it to advance a culture of death and human degradation? Mr. Biden and his party are now engaged in a re-election campaign that emphasizes abortion. He and his party and their apparatchiks in the press are doubling down on transgenderism and the legalized sterilization of children. Elements within the Democratic Party support euthanasia, legal prostitution, further eroding the definition of marriage. His complicity in advancing agendas our Savior and his church have warned would lead to the destruction of souls is incontrovertible.
That's Newsmax host Tom Basile, who went on to close with this.
Mr. Biden has turned the faith into a prop and rejected Christ's truth for a moral relativism that he tries to veil with the sign of the cross. Given the church's retreat from its days as a moral compass willing to challenge secular political leaders, it is likely that it will be left to God to judge him. But make no mistake, Mr. Biden's thirst for power has led to his self-excommunication. He should be branded by all faithful Catholics as a heretic and a threat to the church, rather than a devout member of the faith. It's the least that we can do if church leaders are afraid to act.
Very, very powerful stuff from Tom Basile, again, host of America Right Now, Saturdays on Newsmax. In other news, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene could trigger her motion to vacate House Speaker Johnson as soon as tonight. Greene, as you know, introduced the motion to vacate the speaker back in March. If she does so, the House would have 2 days to take up the issue, but House Democrats say that they'll vote to table the motion, and there are many Republicans, as you know, who are also against it. And there's a big rocket launch coming up tonight that the entire country should be paying close attention to. Although Elon Musk's SpaceX has done this numerous times, NASA will launch 2 astronauts into space on the Boeing Starliner, which has never been done before. This has been years in the making. The Boeing Starliner has also had a fair share of issues getting up to this point. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson.
Remember, this is a test. This is not your normal Dragon launch.
The 2 astronauts on board are test pilots. He mentioned Dragon, which is the SpaceX craft. This is the Boeing Starliner. Bill Nelson himself went to space on the shuttle in 1986. Former Senator Bill Nelson from Florida. Tonight's launch is set for 10:34 p.m. That's Eastern from Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Something to keep an eye on. Stay up to date and informed on all the news all day and night with Newsmax. It is available on most major cable systems, including AT&T, Comcast, Mediacom, Optimum, Spectrum, Xfinity, and many others, as well as Dish and DirecTV. Also, make sure you're streaming on the new Newsmax Plus. If not, go to newsmaxplus.com, get signed up. You can get a free trial. That's newsmaxplus.com. It includes all of your favorite shows and hosts with expert analysis and much more. That's newsmaxplus.com. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Share it with your friends and family. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Monday and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to Newsmax.com. Start today. Newsmax is real news for real people.